Imagine waking up to a headline that sounds like the beginning of a global emergency, not just another regional conflict. Oil tankers are slowing down. Insurance costs are jumping. Traders are staring at their screens before the opening bell. Governments are calling private meetings. Airlines are recalculating fuel risk. And all of it begins in one narrow strip of water the world cannot afford to lose. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a location on a map. It is one of the most fragile pressure points in the global economy. If that route is seriously disrupted, the first thing that breaks may not be what most people expect. Most people hear the words Strait of Hormuz and immediately think of warships, missiles, and military escalation. And yes, those things matter. But that is not the part that should worry the world most, because in a system built on speed, confidence, and constant energy flow, the biggest shocks do not begin when the first barrel disappears. They begin when the market starts believing the flow may not be safe anymore. That is when fear starts moving faster than reality. That is when prices begin reacting before supply fully breaks. And that is when a local crisis starts turning into a global one. If you want more breakdowns like this, where we go beyond the headlines and expose the hidden economics behind geopolitics, take 1 second right now and subscribe to The Hidden Ledger. While you're watching, tell me in the comments what you think breaks first. Oil prices, shipping, inflation, or market confidence itself? I want to know where you think the real danger begins. The reason this waterway matters so much is simple. The modern global economy runs on energy, and a huge amount of that energy moves through narrow routes. The Strait of Hormuz sits between the Persian Gulf and the open sea. It is one of those places the world depends on without thinking about it. On a normal day, tankers pass through it, oil moves, gas flows, ports stay active, refineries keep operating, and markets behave as if the system is permanent. But the moment that route starts looking unsafe, even slightly unsafe, everything begins to change. And that is the first point most people miss. A route like this does not need to be fully closed to create panic. It only needs to become uncertain. One serious threat, one military incident, one escalation that makes shipping companies, insurers, and traders pause. That hesitation is where the real chain reaction begins. Because markets hate uncertainty more than they hate bad news. Bad news can be priced. Uncertainty spreads like poison through every decision in the system. So what breaks first if the Strait of Hormuz closes, or even if the world starts seriously fearing that it could close? The first thing that breaks is confidence. Not oil itself, not every tanker, not every refinery. Confidence. The belief that the system will keep working tomorrow the way it worked yesterday. Once that belief starts to crack, the global economy begins reacting. Think about how this works in real time. Traders are not waiting for every route to shut down before they move. Shipping firms are not waiting for a perfect disaster before they reassess risk. Governments are not waiting for gas stations to run dry. The entire system starts pricing in danger early, and once that happens, costs start rising everywhere at the same time. The next thing that breaks is tanker confidence and insurance logic. This part is massively underrated. Oil does not travel through headlines. It travels through ships, crews, contracts, routes, and insurance coverage. The moment a major energy choke point starts feeling dangerous, insurance premiums can jump fast. That means the cost of moving oil rises. Some operators delay, some reroute, some demand more money, some reduce exposure. All of that adds pressure to the system. That is why the first economic damage in a Hormuz crisis may come from fear and cost, not from empty storage tanks. The world likes to imagine that supply shocks begin when something physically stops. But in reality, modern shocks begin when the system starts paying more. The moment risk becomes expensive, the economy starts bleeding. And if you've made it this far, hit like on this video because this is exactly the kind of story most channels miss. They show you the missiles. They show you the speeches. They show you the explosions. But they do not show you the hidden bill. They do not show you how one narrow route can quietly transmit panic into the entire global economy. Then comes the oil market itself. Once confidence weakens and transport risk rises, oil prices become the next pressure point. And here is where the story gets bigger than the Middle East. Oil is not just another commodity. It is the bloodstream of transport, manufacturing, food logistics, aviation, shipping, and industrial life. So when oil starts moving sharply higher on fear, it does not stay inside the energy market. It spills everywhere. Airlines pay more. Trucking firms pay more. Manufacturers pay more. Importers pay more. The cost of moving goods rises. The cost of producing goods rises. And eventually, the cost of living rises. That is when the average person starts feeling a crisis they may not even understand. They may never look at a map of the Strait of Hormuz, but they will understand higher fuel costs. They will understand more expensive airline tickets. They will understand inflation sticking around longer than expected. They will understand why everyday life suddenly feels tighter. That is how a narrow waterway becomes part of household pressure. That is how geopolitics enters the kitchen table. And the deeper danger is this. Once inflation pressure returns through energy, governments and central banks get trapped. If they try to support growth, they risk feeding inflation. If they try to fight inflation, they risk slowing the economy further. Markets hate that kind of trap. Investors start realizing this is not just an oil spike. It is a system stress event. It touches transport, inflation, confidence, trade and politics all at once. Now imagine the chain reaction extending beyond oil. Shipping schedules tighten. Delivery times become less predictable. Importers become cautious. Inventory planning becomes harder. Refineries start reassessing exposure. Governments begin talking about stability while privately preparing for stress. Stock markets start reading the situation not as a temporary scare, but as a signal that the world remains dangerously dependent on a few fragile choke points. That is when a geopolitical event becomes a financial event. And here is what makes this so dangerous. The global economy looks huge, diversified and advanced from a distance. But underneath that size is fragility. It still depends on narrow routes, concentrated energy flows, and confidence that everything will keep moving. In calm times, that fragility stays hidden. In crisis, it becomes visible all at once. That is what a place like the Strait of Hormuz exposes. Not just dependence on oil, but dependence on smooth function, dependence on trust, dependence on the idea that no one will seriously disrupt the system. Drop a comment right now and tell me honestly. Do you think the world is more vulnerable to supply shocks than most people realize? Or do you think markets would adapt faster than the fear suggests? I read these comments closely, and I want to know how you see it. Because the truth is, markets do adapt eventually. Governments do react eventually. Supply chains do try to adjust eventually. But eventually is not the same thing as without damage. And that gap between the first shock and the eventual adjustment is where the pain lives. That is where inflation rises. That is where panic pricing happens. That is where political pressure builds. That is where consumers start paying. So if the Strait of Hormuz closes, what breaks first? Confidence breaks first. Then insurance logic starts to break. Then pricing stability begins to break. Then shipping confidence weakens. Then inflation expectations rise. Then market calm begins to crack. And once all of those fractures start appearing at the same time, the world moves from watching a regional flashpoint to absorbing a global economic shock. That is the hidden reality. The most dangerous part of a crisis like this is not only the military confrontation. It is the way the modern system reacts to uncertainty. It is the way fear gets transmitted into cost, and cost gets transmitted into inflation, and inflation gets transmitted into politics, markets, and daily life. The shooting does not need to be everywhere for the consequences to be everywhere. That is what makes a choke point so powerful. It concentrates risk into one place, then releases that risk across the planet. And that is why the Strait of Hormuz matters so much. It is not just because of what moves through it. It is because of what the world believes about what moves through it. The moment that belief begins to fail, the system begins to wobble. And once confidence is gone, the damage starts moving faster than most headlines, most governments, and most people are ready for. If you want more videos that break down the hidden economics behind conflict, oil, geopolitics, and global market stress, subscribe to The Hidden Ledger now. And before you go, comment with this question in mind. If a shock like this really hit, what do you think ordinary people would notice first? Gas prices, food prices, stock market panic, or something else entirely? Because the real danger in the modern world is not just what breaks, it is how quickly everything connected to it starts breaking too.